One of these was 4 stars, the other was a DNF. Hi, I'm Susanna and this is my May reading wrap-up. Let's start with Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. Legendborn is the first book in a young adult urban fantasy series. 16-year-old Bree Matthews is grieving the sudden death of her mother. Being accepted to the prestigious UNC Chapel Hill's early college program seems like the perfect getaway from the constant reminders of what has happened. Everything changes when she witnesses bad boy-esque Selvin Kane kill a demon before he unsuccessfully tries to erase the event from her memory. Her ability to resist the memory-erasing spell reminds her of something that happened the night her mother died. She gets sucked into the dangerous world of Legendborn, who are the descendants of King Arthur and his 12 Knights of the Round Table. With the help of Golden Boy Nick Davis, she joins their ranks to uncover the secrets of her mother's death. This book has a creative magic system and its take on Arthurian legends is unique and fascinating. World building was detailed to the point of being a little infodumpy, but I personally didn't find that too distracting. I loved reading a YA book with a black main character, and I especially loved how the fantasy world is connected to real-life issues of racism, racial violence, and the history of colonialism in the United States. The way this book dealt with grief and trauma was moving and poignant. However, the problem with this book is the overuse of young adult cliches. I do wish Bree hadn't fallen so heavily under the stereotype of a clumsy girl who needs to be carried around by men, but I suppose it's part of her journey of becoming stronger and learning more about her powers. Speaking of her powers, I'm not completely on board with her powers being so unique and unheard of. Another cliche is insta-love. Nick's and Bree's relationship escalates very quickly. The whole book takes place within 2 or 3 weeks, and by the end of it they're so much in love that they're ready to die for each other. Another thing is that Nick is obsessively jealous over Bree, and no one in the book comments it in any negative way or at all really, and I think that is something that should have been addressed. And to top it all, Bree obviously cannot help being interested in 2 boys at the same time. The love triangle was completely unnecessary, and the 2 love interests are very stereotypical. Selvin is the brooding guy, and Nick is the cardboard cutout good guy with little to no personality. The rest of the cast, however, was diverse and well done. There was both racial and LGBT+ representation, but unfortunately the cast was so large that no single character got substantial page time. I would have liked to see more of Bree's life outside of the Order. She barely goes to lessons, and her friendship with Alice is discarded for the majority of the book. In conclusion, I'm giving this 4 stars. This is a good young adult urban fantasy with some interesting world building, but overuse of YA cliches. I'll probably continue with this series at some point, but I'm not in a hurry to get to the second book. But if you love young adult urban fantasy and aren't too bothered by insta-love and love triangles, check this book out. That means that the Atlas 6 by Olivie Blake was a DNF for me. I will not do a full review, but I will give you my reasons for not finishing this book. The Atlas 6 is an adult urban fantasy with dark academia vibes. 6 skilled magicians are invited to join the elusive secret society formed on the ruins of the Alexandrian Library. The catch, only 5 of them will actually become the members. Led by the library's caretaker Atlas Blakely, the 6 must show their worth in a competition against each other. I read 200 pages before DNFing this book. This book has 500 pages, so I read approximately 40%. The biggest problem for me was the writing style. It was full of telling rather than showing, and I found it tedious and boring. I honestly disliked the writing in this book from page 1, but I kept going hoping that I would like something in this book, maybe the characters or the plot, but unfortunately that was not the case. The characters were either annoying or too morally grey for me to like them, and I simply did not understand their motivations. There was also 6 points of view in this novel, and that meant that I didn't get to know any of the characters well enough to care about them. I don't usually DNF books because once I start reading a book I want to know what happens in it, But this time, after 200 pages, I decided to Google the synopsis, and after reading that, I decided that this book was not for me. I will not be continuing with the series. But I know that there are a lot of people who have loved this book, so if you enjoy dark academia and morally grey characters, maybe you can read the first page, and if you don't mind the writing style, you might enjoy this book better than I did. In May, I also read my first ever graphic novel. This is Mouse by Art Spiegelman. This has been on my radar for a couple of years now, so when I saw it in my local library, I had to pick it up. This is the complete edition of Mouse, a Survivor's Tale that has both parts of the graphic novel My Father Bleeds History and Here My Troubles Began. This graphic novel tells the tale of the artist's father and his survival through Holocaust. The book depicts Jews as mice and Nazis as cats, with other nationalities as other animals. I loved how honest this story is. Spiegelman does not portray Holocaust survivors as saints or his father as a better person than he was. Instead, the book depicts how the Holocaust affected not only the survivors' lives, but also their children's lives. This is a moving depiction of one family's survival of the Nazi regime and the concentration camps. 5 stars, I highly recommend this to everyone. And then finally, I finished The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Now, I must admit that Dostoevsky and I don't always get along. I don't really enjoy theme-heavy books with long philosophical discussions. Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground is one of my least favorite classics ever, but I did enjoy The Double and Uncle's Dream. The Brothers Karamazov tells the story of 3 brothers and their strenuous relationship with their father and each other. The first half of this book falls under the category of being heavy on theme, but fortunately on the latter half the plot picks up and this book became more enjoyable for me. Not my favorite classic, but I'm glad I've read it so I know what it's about. Now, if you enjoy Dostoevsky more than I do, you probably enjoy The Brothers Karamazov as well. And if you haven't read Dostoevsky before, I suggest that you start with Crime and Punishment and see whether Dostoevsky's writing style is for you. I finished 4 other books in May. One of them is a collection of Finnish translations of texts written by women in antiquity and the Middle Ages. And 3 books were part of my Ancient Texts project. The first is a collection of poems by Sappho and Alcaeus. This was a fascinating read. It has the poems in their original Greek, as well as translations, commentary, and some essays. I read Aeschylus' Oresteia, which is the only surviving trilogy of Greek tragedies. The 3 tragedies depict what happened to Agamemnon and his family after the Trojan War. And lastly, I read Horace's Ars Poetica, or The Art of Poetry. This is a very short poetical work where Horace gives advice on writing poetry and drama. This book has had a great influence on Western literary theory and introduced, among other things, the concept of starting a story in medias res, in the middle of action. Now in June, my goal is to read the final 2 books from my Ancient Text project. The other one is Aesop's Fables, and the other one is a selection of Metamorphoses by Ovid. I will also be reading the text and looking through these 4 atlases. My plan was also to finish the Atlas 6 in June, but since I DNF'd it, I'm going to replace it with something else. I haven't decided yet what I'm going to read instead. I'll also read 2 or 3 books from my mother's bookshelf when I go to visit her, but I haven't decided yet what I'm going to read. Probably I'll pick up either Hemingway or Steinbeck or some other 20th century classic. So those were the books I read in May and my plans for June. Let me know in the comments what you're currently reading, and I'll see you in my next video.